number 105 on the eve of Celtics-Nets here. And we're going to look past Celtics-Pelicans tonight as we record this. There is a game at the Garden tonight before the Celtics hit the road through the weekend for Brooklyn and Charlotte miniseries coming up. But this is a big one. The Nets have loomed ever since they fired Steve Nash and hired Jacque Vaughn as their interim. The whole Ime Udoka fiasco, I think, is what me and Matt Brooks were talking about the last time we were here from Nets Daily. Great to have you back, Matt. And it's unbelievable. It really wasn't even that long ago we talked on here about whether this whole Nets thing was going to fall apart completely. And that's where I was. I kind of forget where you were at that time, but
I was.
What's happened since?
I definitely was. I was like one of the biggest this is over doomers. I was convinced. Felt like I had pretty good idea of what was going on. And they kind of, they put Vaughn in place, and it felt like it was kind of we don't really know what else to do. So we're just going to, put Vaughn in place, who's been here for a while. And this team has really just found itself with him at the helm. They've obviously gone on longest winning streak of the season, 12 games, and just kind of honed into that identity that we know they could have had. Also, a lot of this has come with they've had really good health. And that is probably the biggest thing of anything, is these guys are just finally on the floor together.
Yeah, and obviously it's the offense that's taken off. The Celtics were in that top spot offensively through the start of the season, really through Christmas or so there until Denver caught them. But the Nets, since that Vaughn change, have been putting up like that 117. I forget what the number is as of a couple games ago. Offensive rating, that's his historic number. They obviously have the record from a couple years ago with Harden, Irving, and Durant. But that's been in place. Durant was playing at MVP level before the injury, and we'll get to that in a second here. But I'm stunned by the defense. Defense moving in the top 10 territory. It was 29th under Nash to start the year, which was really what made this team such a disaster. The Ben Simmons, Nick Claxton thing's working, which surprises me. There's just so much that surprised me about this run, because in our previous episodes, we've talked about how it just didn't seem like the Nets had the personnel to play good defense, never mind switch like they do.
Yeah, it's really interesting how they've settled into this. They've kind of settled into having these two roaming, large, essentially 7-foot defenders, which I'm sure Boston fans can relate to a little bit just based on how they played last year. Nets do it differently. They're not having KD free safety as much as maybe somebody like Rob Williams was. But the general idea is there in that you have these two shot blockers. One's pretty much a primary shot blocker. The other one's lurking on the weak side in Nick Claxton and Kevin Durant. And that's worked out really well. They've been super stingy in isolations. I want to say they're top of the league.
That's defending. Right.
Yep. So this team can just really guard the ball well. And they have the shot blocking, kind of supporting all this. And Nick Claxton, who's been a defensive player of the year, and Durant, who's had maybe his best defensive season, at the very least in Brooklyn, but one of his best defensive seasons, period. So it's a simple solution in a sense when you talk about it, but it is it's working so far.
Yeah, and that isolation stats is going to be super interesting on Thursday, because again, I'm just stunned to see the Nets doing that. A top 2 isolation defense team. They're really tied with Memphis effectively for that top spot. And the Celtics are way down the list, and they were number 1 by far last year. This year they are 25th guarding isolation, giving up about a point per possession. So that kind of shows some of the holes in the Celtics defense, and Rob's back now, which is going to be a big difference. Looks like he's going to rest tonight and play on Thursday. Horford will probably sit the game out. But the Celtics defense has slipped a little bit. They've creeped back in the top 10 territory, but there's probably a conversation between these two teams right now, at least where they're at today, in terms of who has the better defense, which is just unbelievable after last year's sweep.
Yeah, it's been interesting, and the Nets have nailed some of the small things too, even just like their rotations on the weak side, whether it's like things like Xing out or just rotating down and sinking down and helping when you need to. Those things have been cleaned up too. So it isn't, yes, they have these like really good individual defenders, and they've helped their personnel with guys like Yuta Watanabe. TJ Warren's been pretty good defensively. Royce O'Neal's been pretty good defensively. They've really, gotten a better cast in a sense, but they're also just working on a string a lot better.
And so you mentioned all those wings, Ben Simmons, they got a cast of guys that could potentially get them through this Kevin Durant absence, which is just going to be massive. I mean, everything revolved around him there. His like really as good of a performance as he's ever had to start this year, lifted them in so many different ways. And now he goes down with the MCL sprain again, same injury as last year. I think it cost him about 6 weeks last year. They're hoping it's going to be a little bit less this time, but still a significant amount of time that could really shift their standing here. How are they going to get through this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I'm watching for is just where the creation comes from. So the secret to the Nets this year really has been that they've gotten constant production of like really superstardom production on the floor for 48 minutes. The Kyrie minutes, just Kyrie, have been a huge positive, which has not been the case really, I think, since he's gotten to Brooklyn, at least when he's played with KD. So those minutes have been a plus. And then obviously anything KD does is a plus because Durant's having, a just ridiculous season. So it'll be interesting to see now that those minutes by Kyrie are kind of like your basis of what your offense is. What is it going to be after that? Is it going to be a Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, TJ Warren lineup that's going to work? It's just trying to come up with different lineups outside of anytime we have Kyrie out there. We feel pretty good about that. What do those look like? So I think that'll be the thing I'm looking for the most. The shooting, they've done a really good job at finding 3-and-D guys this offseason. Defensively, Nick Claxton will be manning the back line. He'll have more, I guess, more of a load on his shoulders in terms of what he has to do night to night, but he's still going to do his thing. So the big thing will just come down to creation for this team.
Yeah, and you do wonder about defense too, what direction that's going to go in, because Durant was a big part of that, a block and a half per game, able to do a ton at the wing. It's almost, you compare it to Boston last year, you think of those three guys across the back line, it's almost like what Cleveland was doing last year when they were playing number one defense with Markkanen and Mobley and Allen. Not quite that level of defenders, but close when you think about what all three of those guys are capable of at their peak there. Where's Simmons at in all this now? Because I think what's good for him is that he's been able to take a back seat offensively. He's had some bigger assist games lately, but it feels like he'll have to do a little bit more when you talk about creation with Durant out.
Yeah, I mean, he just like it's really as simple as he needs to put his head down and consistently. Vaughn talked about this today. Jacque Vaughn, head coach of the Nets, talked about how they just want consistent downhill, or just I think it was just consistent aggression from Ben. And he was talking about in the game that the Nets pretty recently had against the Pelicans. Ben had a couple of really nice sequences. He pressed CJ McCollum full court, got this really nice drive, I think, dish to Nick Claxton. And it was really good first 6 minutes, but he's talking, Vaughn wants to see more from Simmons, at minute 18, minute whatever, 30. And I think that's kind of going to be the big thing for the Nets is they now need that 30-minute production from Ben. It can't just be in spurts, especially at beginnings of games. They need him to be that, in large part, second star, at the very least, like really capable ball handler behind Kyrie.
Yeah, for sure. And I still want to see more from him in that sense. 'Cause we all knew it'd be a good fit if he could just fit in around those two. But now it is, like you said there, a time where he's going to have to put his head down, create, and do some of the stuff he did in Philly, which we just haven't seen still. It's good to see him get more comfortable and actually look like he can fit in this whole dynamic that they're creating there. But it's going to change without Durant because that guy's just drawing doubles and just like has such great gravity. And I don't even know if Irving can replicate that. It's going to be so interesting how they adapt around this. And it really could bolster Jacque Vaughn's Coach of the Year candidacy, which I think in the recent media poll they did of 30 teams, he was pretty significantly ahead of everybody in that. So what's working for him as head coach? What's the biggest difference, Nash to Vaughn, that you're seeing?
It just seems like the guys seem to, I don't know what the word is. There's just a sense of buy-in that wasn't there with Nash, especially at the very end. And I mean, that's like 97% of coaching. I think a lot of it is just having the right personality in place for the right group. And that's kind of what this has been for the Nets this year with Vaughn. This is just a guy that the guys in the locker room really seem to respect. He's been pretty straightforward, and he really preaches simplicity is his big thing because I think in large part he believes that this group, which is mostly a veteran laden group, can sort of figure out things on the go, and that's really worked. And it's I do think he's similar in a lot of ways to Nash. There are just a couple of things that maybe you and I aren't aware of, but there's things within the locker room that are definitely making that difference. But I do think the biggest thing is just buy-in and health too. I mean, I'm going to bring it up one more time. Having KD and Kyrie on the floor with Ben Simmons just for as many games as they have. I mean, I think the three stars of Simmons, KD, and Kyrie have long surpassed how many minutes KD, Kyrie, and Harden had together. So I think it's a combination of things, but definitely having the right guy seems to make the difference.
Yeah, and if there are a lot of similarities, you do have to think health's a big part of that. And you look back at 2021 under Nash, could have gone a lot differently if there was health, and you know that for sure based on how that Bucks series was going before Harden and Irving exited it. So maybe Nash would have gone in a better direction if there just wasn't all the different things that popped up over that time. I tended to not think that was the case because I just didn't think he adjusted well. I didn't think he emphasized defense enough. That much was clear. So there are definitely, I think, some schematic differences. But you almost wonder what could have been because he's been here the whole time. He was interim in 2020 and went okay. I know they got swept in that series, but they finished the year strong under him. And that's the point where they could have just named him the coach then, and he stays on through all the coaching changes that happen in between. But it almost seems to be happening, I guess not too late now because they still could contend for a championship this year. But it seems like their best opportunities at really going for a win in the past.
Yeah, I mean, we could look back. Even like last year, like the Nets, they were number one seed through I think like December, and KD went down at around the same time.
Yeah, that's where you look at health again. Yeah,
I do think that there are things that Vaughn's doing better, like his usage of timeouts, even just in game. You mentioned the adjustments thing. That's one of the big things that sticks out. A lot of those are usually right after there's a defensive miscue. Nash was kind of we're just going to sort of play through it and just hope these things sort themselves out. And Vaughn kind of, he rules a little bit more than Iron Fist, I guess, in a sense of that he if he sees something he doesn't like, he's going to call timeout, which is that really seems to make a difference for this group.
Yeah, for sure. I'm wondering, the biggest thing I'm curious about coming into this episode and this matchup is Nick Claxton, because we all remember the lasting memory of him in that series between these two teams last year. I think going 1 of 11 at the line, just really flaming out at that center spot. And I remember him playing with Harden, just dropping pick and roll passes. And he's got this great physique for that position as a roller and all the skills you would think would be perfect for the modern center position. But he just couldn't seem to put it all together. And now, again, it just seems like from Nash to Vaughn, he's become one of the better defensive centers in the league. I know he's way up there in blocks. Offensively, I don't really have a great feel for how he's playing, but this guy just seems to be all putting it together on the fly right now. What's been the big key for him?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides of the ball. So defensively, he's still maintained, he's bulked up a little bit, but he's still one of the best switch bigs in the league. I think he's 74th percentile, somewhere around there in terms of guarding isolations, which is one of the best marks for centers right now. But he's also just gained a better awareness of when to help as, the low man or when to rotate over and extinguish fires, even when that isn't his rotation. He has more scheme versatility. They can play him in drop. They can have him hedge a little bit. They can obviously keep him as a switch big, which is something he's been able to do since he pretty much came into the league. Offensively, ton of growth there. His hands have improved for number one, but also his sense as a screener has improved a lot. So his timing when he comes out of those screens has improved. When he rolls, he's better at rolling, like not rolling into teammates, for example. And then the last thing I think that's really improved is his offhand. You'll see him and they're a little awkward looking, but he's developed his offhand in terms of making these little hook shots if he has a mismatch, or even if he's down low enough to the rim, he's got a center on him, he feels pretty confident flicking up this little hook. That was just a shot he didn't have. I remember against Boston 2 years ago, not last year's first round flameout, but the year before that, the Nets had a couple possessions where Nick ended up with the ball, and I think he was guarded by like Evan Fournier, and he just couldn't do anything. He couldn't post him up. He couldn't even get a shot up. That's a completely different Nick now. He's taking advantage of those situations.
Yeah, it's super impressive, and he's a great example of a draft success for this group. And they've had some. He's probably the biggest one right now in recent years, and he changed his game well for the NBA. It's super impressive. From I think he went to Texas, right, and just had a completely different game there. And you're looking back on him as one of the guys that probably would have gone earlier in his class if you redrafted that one.
Yeah, yeah, he was Georgia. He had a weird role
Georgia,
in
that's right. Yeah.
he was a weird player because they kinda used him as, like, a ball handling center. It was very weird, like, his role just didn't make any sense, so that's kinda why he slipped so far. Worked out great for the Nets, obviously, but, yeah, he was a weird kind of college project player that's panned out for them pretty nicely.
Yep, for sure. And that's where they stand. So that you have to consider them one of the East contenders now, which shocks me. I think it changes the whole entire dynamic at the top of the East. Cleveland seemed to be a team that was up there. Milwaukee hovering around 500 since their 9-0 start. They've slipped quite a bit, and it's hard not to put the Nets at full strength over them right now, the way they've looked offensively. Things could change there. A lot of different trades could happen. But in terms of stacking them up in the East now, where do they stand among all these different contenders, Philly included as well? You have to probably throw in there too.
Yeah, Philly's in the mix. I'm just not a Milwaukee believer this year. I don't it just
I'm
feels
surprised.
off.
I mean, I've always been the biggest Bucks guy, and you just watch them every night now. No Middleton too has had an even bigger
Yeah.
impact this year. It doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't look good. Their half court offense is bottom 5. It's not it's just I don't
They got
believe in.
smoked on Christmas by
Yeah.
Boston.
Yeah, it's not good. It looks off. When the Nets played, the Nets smoked them too, and it was like it just looked odd. Giannis has been really good MVP level, but he also even feels like
Not quite the same.
not quite the same. It's weird. It's a weird situation. So I'd probably put Philly over them. Right now, I'd probably go, I need to see the Nets beat Boston, like, before I can think about doing, hierarching it a little bit different. So I'm gonna probably go Boston, Brooklyn, maybe Philly at number 3, and then maybe Milwaukee. I kind of like Cleveland depending on who they play. But they're young, but I do like them, and I think they're a team that they're going to challenge. Like, even the Nets, like, I actually think that's like not a great matchup for the Nets, just because the one weakness with the Nets defensively is their point of attack defense. They just, until Simmons kind of looks a little more acclimated, they don't really have anybody to guard these, quick jitterbug guards, which Cleveland definitely has one of in Garland. You could argue they have two of them with Mitchell. So yeah, it's a really interesting Eastern Conference. I think that's probably what I go with right now. But the team I could probably drop a little bit further is the Bucks, if anybody.
Yeah, more physically imposing bigs there too. I go back to that playing game last year though, a much worse version of the Nets kind of tore through them. I know it's one game, but it did look like they had the upper hand in that matchup. Whole different dynamic in Cleveland this year with Mitchell coming in, but they don't have wings, which
Yeah,
still worries me with them. Like they don't. We're talking like Lamar Stevens, Dean Wade. That's what they're trying to scrap
Okoro.
together in the East. Okoro, I don't even think plays in the playoffs if they start
Yeah,
today. He can't hit a three, like a
yeah.
single three. So it's tough to stack up with Giannis and Durant and Tatum if you're them with that kind of depth at the wing. And I saw Jake Fisher wrote about them searching for something there, but I don't know how they get it done. They have no picks. They don't have a lot of value to trade. Their roster kind of is what it is at this point. Mobley needs to take a leap.
Yeah, the tricky part, the Nets just played the Cavs recently. Like, what they essentially did was they just sagged off and just clogged, essentially the paint, and got in rebounding position, and also just took away driving lanes by sagging off of Okoro, Stevens, and Mobley a little bit when those guys were spaced in the corners. So I do fear that being the case for Cleveland, and that's kind of what happens when you're a young team that isn't fully developed yet, in terms of you don't have all the pieces you might need for a championship run, but you go for, a young star like Mitchell, and maybe you are a little bit farther along in terms of where you thought you were going to be with this trajectory. So they're dangerous though. They have good players. That's why I look at them
They're
and I'm
so
like, I would not want to
dangerous.
play them.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't want to run into them. There's some sneaky because you could potentially consider them a 5 seed. The way it's looking for Milwaukee, they could slip to 5, but in terms of pedigree, they're probably fifth in line. And you got a Chicago that plays Boston really tough last night. They might sneak through the play-in tournament if they keep this all together. There's a lot of dangerous teams lower down the standings. You got to consider Indiana too. Like, I wouldn't be stunned if Indiana pushed any one of the top teams 6-7 games.
Chicago's the one I look at because Chicago's what, like 6-1 against all the top teams in the East right now. Like
9-2 now against the
they're
top four. Yeah.
they're okay, so they've moved up a lot more ahead since I last looked at this. Yeah, they're just the classic. Like they don't wake up for games against bad teams, but they do seem to play these top end teams really well. And if you can just like get through the playoffs, I don't know if that's a sustainable way to go far in the playoffs. I don't love the
With them,
whole
it's just like what we're talking about with Brooklyn. It's that health thing. And Lonzo's, who knows when Lonzo's going to play
Yeah,
again? Probably not this year. But 1 year ago today, or at least a couple of days ago, they're the 1 seed in the East.
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, they have the talent. Like it's a team you don't want to play, and they have just even the way they have a stretch big and Vucevic, scores that are like Levine's been playing great lately. DeRozan's always a threat. So yeah, they're the team I look at and I'm like, I just would not want to play that team. Like you imagine you're Boston and Brooklyn and you're like, all right, we got the 1 and 2 seeds. If Brooklyn can survive this stretch without KD and you have to play Chicago in round 1, it's like I just wouldn't want to do it.
It's a terrifying thought for Boston right now, for
Yep.
sure, especially where they've been blown out twice in Chicago this year.
Hmm.
Let's talk about this matchup tomorrow. Real quick, though, we'll give a quick shout out to the network sponsors here joining us on the Garden Report this week and for the foreseeable future. Good friends at HelloFresh, HelloFresh.com/Garden21 is going to get you 21 free meals and free shipping. Forgot to mention that on the Garden Report after last game. Loved it. Again, one of my favorite sponsors we've had. The food's awesome. Comes packaged, cold, fresh. I got all the fish meals that they had, bass, salmon, some salads in there as well. It was amazing. I'm about to order again with my own money, for real. We've all done that the last round. And again, it's well worth it. You're going to get 21 free meals. You can get a wide range of great meals, whatever your diet restrictions are. They're going to have options for you. So head over there, HelloFresh.com/Garden21. Of course, a shout out as well to our friends at Athletic Greens. There they are. athleticgreens.com/Garden gets you 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. That's vitamins, minerals, adaptogens, probiotics, and more. Everything you need for your nutrition is pretty much in here, along with a year's supply of immune boosting vitamin D. Super important in the winter, short days. Get that vitamin D for a whole year, along with 5 free travel packs when you go to athleticgreens.com/garden. And one more, Rocket Money, rocketmoney.com/garden is going to get you their app, which could potentially save you hundreds in unused subscriptions when you head over there. You might not even know some of the ones that you are subscribed to right now. So head over there, rocketmoney.com/garden. We're overrun with sponsors, Matt. Good times over here at CLNS Media. Let's get back to Celtics-Nets tomorrow. Again, looking like no Durant, no Horford probably. Rob should be available if he's going to sit tonight and be, maybe 30 minutes worth of playing time. He was not a guy that we saw in this matchup last time. And the Celtics played great defense nonetheless there. Pretty gritty, grindy matchup between these two last time. Tatum had a great game, rolling. They had a tough time containing him on the Brooklyn side, but they go on a 12-game win streak right after that. What are you anticipating, and what are some of the keys to this game?
Whew. It's lots changed with this. I had this matchup circled like everybody coming into the year. This is the one that, there's been some fun matchups for the Nets. But this is one I was pretty excited about. Learned that Boston was on a back-to-back, factored that in, still was very excited for this. And then this KD injury happened. So I think honestly, from my side of things, as much as I am excited for this matchup, I'm personally just watching to see like what the Nets rotations look like. Cause I think this is going to be a little bit of
this
a
is game
feeling
one
out
without
game.
Durant. Yeah.
Game 1 without Durant. This is going to be the feeling out game. So you're going to see what combinations work, what don't. It'll be interesting to see. Kyrie hasn't been great in this matchup, and it always feels like Boston's length and positional versatility. This is one of the few matchups where he just can't quite get his shots up the way he necessarily does against other teams. We've seen him have really good games, like game 1 of last year's first round series. But in large part, I just feel like those like windows of opportunity aren't there for him as much. So that'll be something I'll be watching. I'm trying to remember if Simmons played last time against
He did
Boston.
not.
He did not. So that's another one we're going to look at. What does it look like? How does Boston defend him? Are they going to give him the Bruce Brown treatment that we saw in last year's playoffs and kind of sag off of him and say, hey, we're gonna trust our length and the way we can cover up the floor and assume that this guy isn't going to hurt us. So I think those are all things we'll be watching. A lot of fun things despite not having Durant, just in terms of like things we can learn from this game.
Yeah, like you said, Irving 7 of 21 in that last matchup. Durant committed 8 turnovers. They keyed on him successfully again, though he had a great shooting night, 13 of 24 from the field. Royce O'Neal struggled. Harris had a solid game. Claxton 1 of 6 at the free throw line. So Nets gave away a lot of opportunities in that one and only ended up scoring 92 points. Celtics weren't great offensively either, outside of Brown and Tatum, but Brown at 34. Tatum 29. That's become more the norm for those two, and they racked up steals and blocks as well, 6 and 4 of those between them. They turned it up defensively for that game, and that has been the story for the Celtics this year. Is when they really want to, they can turn up the heat defensively and just become a menace on that end. And they did it without Rob last time, playing with a smaller lineup. They start Grant in that game, so there was no Marcus Smart that night. That he's kind of up in the air for this one. He's questionable tonight with the knee contusion. If he doesn't play tonight, guess he could potentially play tomorrow, but we'll see. Maybe he misses both games. That one's tougher to tell, but he wasn't there last game either. So Celtics, the offense has slipped over the last month or two here, where I guess we're in the month 2 of that regression now. And it's tough to really point to specifically why. Brown and Tatum have continued to play at a high level. I guess the passing isn't there at the high level. I mean, they only had 3 assists between those two to start this game last month. And the shooting certainly has slipped off for the role players. I mean, Derek White's down to like 25% from 3 since his hot start. Hauser isn't as much of a factor anymore. Brogdon is still playing well, but Al Horford, even Grant Williams, not quite the same level that he was early this year. So that historic shooting you were seeing from this team has slipped. And they've been a jump shooting team, which probably scares you to some degree coming into a game like this, because if they're 40 plus, they're going to win with the volume that they shoot at. But it's also tough to find alternatives outside of Brown and Tatum if other guys aren't hitting their jump shots.
Yeah, they're a funny team. Just in terms of the way they play. Like the one thing, I mean, the Nets are kind of in that boat now where they don't have a ton of methods there of winning games now. Like a lot of it's gonna be what Kyrie can create, out of the pick and roll with Nick and Ben. And it's just gonna be like, hey, are they able to stumble on other pockets of offense? Is Ben Simmons and Seth Curry in DHOs? Is that gonna be something that they can get some good offense out of? Is TJ Warren able to make an impact? I remember Hauser had a huge block on TJ, and the last time these two teams played, is he able to, play with a little bit of extra oomph out there? So I think both teams are struggling to build identities now outside of what they're getting from their stars.
Yeah, for sure. And Grant's picked it up. I think he's a key to that. You look different in that Chicago game when he's out there and Tatum can use him as an outlet. And this is the key for Tatum. So as I mentioned earlier, that media survey came out, and this guy had a stranglehold on MVP after Curry got hurt there. And now he's behind Luka and Jokic in that mix. Statistically, it's hard to argue against that. Even impact, those two guys have just been head and shoulders above him, at least over the last month or so here. So he's in the mix still. But you look at even that stat I just threw up, 1 assist, 9 turnovers the last time these two teams met. It's that passing element that comes and goes for him. Some nights he's electric. He had a triple-double recently, I think, against San Antonio, only his second ever. But he can be great in that department, and sometimes it's just not there for him. And Jaylen Brown really hasn't been there for him this year. So you still look at this team in terms of contending for the finals. The biggest question mark to me with them is that passing, especially when you're going to be looking at a few games without Marcus Smart here potentially. Like you lose almost all your facilitating.
Yeah. And I mean, as I said, I think both teams are going to be in that position of they now need to. It's going to be the battle of who can get more creation out of their
Yeah.
guys. I think on paper you look at Boston, you say, well, they have two guys in Jalen and Jason. But yeah, I mean, you've made the point that kind of comes and goes with both of those guys. So it'll be intriguing. Brooklyn side will be the same thing. What can they get out of Simmons? Can Simmons get downhill and showcase that passing that he's able to do on a regular basis and spray to corner shooters? It's all that first step for him. So different I guess conundrums for both teams, but same outcome, I would say.
For sure. So I mentioned this media survey. Have you gotten a chance to take a look at this yet?
I haven't.
I'll roll through it a little bit here. I don't know exactly when this was conducted, because some of the answers are interesting here, but it does show a recent shift in some of the sentiment for some of these teams. So in terms of winning the East, this was 30 beat writers, one for each team, obviously. 57% see Boston winning the East. Does that surprise you?
No, not necessarily. I mean, maybe that sounds. I don't know how that sounds to you, but to me, I don't think that's necessarily surprising. Just because, like, as good as the Nets have been, there's just never been a sustained period outside of I guess they've been good the first half of the season.
Brooklyn comes in at 10%. Milwaukee 33. Those are the only three teams that got votes.
Brooklyn should be higher than that, but I just think there's been so much that's gone down with the Nets, and especially now you have this injury. I see why they're not the favorite, and I also, as I said, like, I just need to see them beat Boston in any setting. I mean, we're going back, I don't know how many games now that they haven't won against Boston. That needs to change, because at some point, if these two teams hit their full potential in the playoffs, they're going to have to play each other. So I think that makes sense to me. Although I would have Brooklyn's odds a little bit higher.
They're also 10% to win the title. Not a lot of love for the West. Clippers come in at 34% to win the West. Denver 30. In terms of winning the championship, Clippers just at 3% behind Boston, Milwaukee, and Brooklyn. So yeah, not a lot of love for the West. Brooklyn's bounce back, most surprising storyline of the season, 20%. Kings come in at 17%. Warriors disappointment, 13%. Other ones here, like I said, Luka, 43% MVP. Jokic, 40%. Giannis and Tatum come in at 7%. KD, 3%. Does he deserve a little bit more love there?
I would say so, yeah. But although this injury, we'll see how long this keeps him out. But I'm assuming this was done before the injury, and in that case, yes.
Definitely before that. Pool 6 man. That word doesn't
hate it. Hate it.
Brogdon comes in at 23. That one's just such a mixed bag. You got Poole votes, Brogdon votes, Mathurin got 13% alongside Christian Wood, but you also had Russell Westbrook, Malik Monk, Norman Powell, and Bobby Portis getting votes. I feel like
Bobby Portis should be higher. That's the only one I'll say. The Sixth Man of the Year is like just the worst award. I just feel like it.
People never, just throw a name out there.
I know. I don't know. I don't know if it's that people like don't watch it enough, or we don't have like specific enough. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it just.
Also, everyone's out all the time, so the 6 men are always starting.
Yeah, it's yeah, exactly. In the load management era, like, I just don't think we need 6 Man of the Year anymore. It's that one and Clutch Player of the Year. That's I'm like, I don't know why we have these awards.
Markkanen running away with most improved. That one's not too surprising. I guess Shea at 33 could be higher, but he's right there. Coach of the Year, Vaughn at 43. Willie Green and Joe Mazzulla tied at 23, which I think is fair. And I guess as a clutch player of the award now too, to throw in the mix there. But those are the big ones. That's up on NBA.com. A bunch of other miscellaneous stuff as well out there. Kevin Durant got toughest to guard. That one's not too surprising.
Yeah,
most underrated, Tyrese Halliburton. Can't disagree with that. Yeah, but that's it. That's all we got. Matt Brooks, great to talk to you as always. I'll see you down in Brooklyn tomorrow. Yep. Hopefully I'll make it there. And tonight we got post game Celtics Pelicans. I'm sure you'll be keeping an eye on that game as well ahead of the back-to-back tomorrow. Nets practice today. You can go check out Matt's coverage on Nets Daily and follow him at Matt Brooks NBA. This is Dome Theory 105. Go check us out. iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. We did Songs of the Year last time we were on here after the new year. So go check that out. And we should be back later this week, probably this weekend, with a new episode as the Celtics hit the road here. Bunch of interviews coming up, lined up. So stay tuned for those at Dome Theory. And once again, thanks, Matt. I'm Bobby Manning. We'll talk to you soon.